Erev Tov, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. We are back at it. Thursday night, Parashat Shavua Shiur. We want to thank the generous sponsors for this evening's Shiur. We have the Esav family who has sponsored the class in memory of Mrs. Susie Esav, Zichronah Livracha, and as well as Mr. and Mrs. Meira Zaguri, who sponsored the shiur in memory of his dear father, Mr. Abraham Zaguri, Zichrono Livracha. May the words of Torah that we say tonight be la'ilu nishmatam, tin nafsham tzeruram, bitzora hayim. We are studying Parashat Vayishlah, continuing the story of Yaakov Avinu, this time in preparation of his famous encounter with his brother Esav at the beginning of the parasha. What exactly was his strategy that he used? What did he employ when leading up to this encounter? Before confronting Esav, Yaakov Avinu sent messengers, emissaries to appease him. The Torah begins, Vayishlah Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv arza seir sedei Edom. Yaakov sent malachim ahead of him to his brother Esav. Vayitzav otam lemor, and he commanded them, Ko tomeru ladoni le'Esav. This is what you shall say to my master, Esav. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. So said your servant Yaakov. Im Lavan garti va'echar adata. I have sojourned with Lavan. I've lingered till now. Vahi li shor v'chamor. I have both oxen, donkey, tzon ve'eved, as well as flocks of sheep and servants, the shivcha maidservants. Va'ashecha la'agid ladoni limsochen be'enecha. And therefore I'm sending to inform you to find favor in your eyes. And Rashi here very famously writes in the opening verse, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim, malachim mamash. He actually sent them real angels to Esav to appease him. So why was it necessary? One thing we're going to talk about tonight is why was it necessary for Yaakov to actually send heavenly angels as messengers? Why not human messengers? Why not send a drone? Why not send all the other things, UPS, FedEx with a nice letter? Registered mail, registered mail, sign here to confirm receipt, and that would have been enough. What's the need to send heavenly malachim? Also, why was Yaakov so scared? Why exactly? Why did he fear? Why was he overcome with fear prior to confronting Esav? He was so fearful, says the Torah, that he felt that he needed to divide up his household into two separate camps. The Torah writes, Vayira Yaakov me'od vayetzelo, that Yaakov became very frightened and it distressed him. Vayachatz et ha'am asher ito, so he divided the people, ve'tatzom et habakar ve'agemalim, and as well the flocks, the cattle, the camels, lishne machanot, to two camps. What was the idea behind it? Vayomer im yavo Esav el ha'machane achad ve'ikau. If Esav comes to one camp and strikes it, then Hamachane Hanishar Lifleta, the remaining camp will be able to survive and will escape. And Rashi says that the remaining camp will survive against Esav's will because I will battle him. Yaakov prepared himself, Rashi says, for three things: for giving a gift, paying tribute, as well for tefillah, and lastly, if need be, for war. So again, besides the opening questions that we asked, why send angels, and as well, why was he so scared? A couple other things that now we have to figure out. Since Yaakov had already prayed to Hashem to protect him, this was in last week's parasha at the time of the dream, and save him from Esav, okay? Then why did he feel necessary to split his household into two camps? He already said, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. And also, if he was so worried, why was he so confident that the second camp would survive? What makes Yaakov think at this moment that indeed, that if Esav was to wipe out the first camp, what's going to prevent Esav from going and attacking the second camp? Why is Yaakov so sure at this point? There's a lot of things going on in the beginning of the parasha. There was a big tzaddik named Rav Tzvi Hirsch of Ziddishov, Zechutei Hagen Aleinu. And he comments on the pasuk, Vayira Yaakov me'od vayetzer lo, that Yaakov became very frightened and it distressed him. And he takes the word vayetzer, which means distressed, and he writes that it also connotes being in a makom tsar. Makom tsar means a very narrow area, a very tight spot. Yaakov Avinu was walking a thin line here at this moment because, again, vayetzer comes from the word tsar, which means narrow. And he goes on to explain that Yaakov, in many places, is described as Norah. Norah literally means awesome. Awesome, although modern day slang refers to, it's awesome, that's amazing. But awesome actually means something to be fearful, from the word awe, that you are in awe of what is actually in front of you. That's Yaakov is referred to as Norah. We see this actually in the Amidah that we say. Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagivor, Ve'hanora. Hashem, who is the great, the strong, and the awesome. So this, says the Zohar, Gadol, Gibor, Ve'hanora, a person has to have in mind the Avot. Hagadol, the great, refers to the Midah of Chesed, which is Abraham Avinu. Abraham Avinu was Gadol Sheba Chesed. He was the greatest of the Chesed. The person has to think whenever he says Gadol, he thinks of Abraham and he thinks of Chesed. Gibor is corresponds to Gevurah. Gevurah is Yitzchak. So Yitzchak is the Gibor, the Midah Gvurah, which is epitomized by him. And lastly, Hanora, awesome, is Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu is the Midah of Tiferet. So we see that Yaakov, which is Tiferet, is also connected to Norah. In fact, last week, Yaakov Avinu had his dream, and after he woke up from the dream, he says, "Vayira vayomar ma norah hamakom hazeh." How awesome is this place? Ma norah. He uses the word norah. So it's a little bit difficult to understand because Tiferet is Yaakov's midah, is usually characterized by rachamim, divine mercy. So how is it also norah? How is it also something that is awesome, which implies fear and awe? So the Rav explains that and he reconciles this difficulty by saying that you have to look at what the Noam Elimelech writes. And he says, the Noam Elimelech in Parashat Vayera, the midat of Abraham Avinu is chesed, which is aligned to the right. The midah of Yitzchak, which is Gevurah, is aligned to the left. And whereas Yaakov Avinu, which is Tiferet, is a combination of Gevurah, which is the left, and chesed on the right. And that, therefore, Tiferet can be more like chesed, associated with rachamim, but sometimes there's also gevurah involved. The Gemara Masechet Sotah tells us, le'olam teheh smol doche ve'yamin mekarevet, that the left hand should always push away, and the right should always draw things near. So if you understand this, based on what we said, the job of Abraham Avinu and Yitzchak Avinu were clearly labeled in our Gemara. Abraham Avinu, which is on the right, which demonstrates kindness, he's the right hand that draws people near. He's mekarevet. B'chesed, opened his doors. Gulut chasadim, machnasat orchim, come to my house, come, go, let me teach you about God, bring in. Right? In fact, even when it came to Sodom, he attempted to draw even the people of Sodom near. He wanted to draw the Reshaim, save the Reshaim. Maybe I can change them. Maybe I can. Right? We spoke about it in this class that he had high hopes for even his son Ishmael to be saved. Right? That was Abraham being mekarev. In contrast, Yitzchak was he acted in accordance to the more strict letter of the law, severity. The left hand that pushes away. Hey, if you're not holding with me, then maybe it's best you step aside. Okay? He would reprimand people who weren't doing the right things, who had shortcomings, who needed the tikkun. Because the pasuk says, Shlomo Melech says in Kohelet, Ki Adam en tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yecheta. There's no man who is wholly righteous that doesn't sin. Every person sins, and therefore we have to find out what your mistakes are. And Yitzchak would use the left of Gvurah to keep them in check. So now, what's the job of Yaakov Avinu? Well, clear. It's not so clear. Yeah, Abraham, it's very clear what he does. Yitzchak, it's very clear what he does. But Yaakov, it's not so straightforward, and it's more demanding. He had to tread the line. He's the middle. He had to tread the line between chesed on the right and gvura on the left. On one hand, he needed to treat those who were deserving with a lot of kindness and a lot of chesed. That's functioning like the right hand. And on the other hand, he had to treat those who deserve to be punished with gvura and din. That's the left hand. So the midah of tiferet is described as nora. It's described as awesome because it is fraught with the constant, awful fear of the chesed and gvura line. And what happens if I'm too chesed and I should have been more gvura? What if I was too strict and I should have been more chesed? It's finding the right balance. And it's analogous to a man walking a very narrow bridge that is right over a very turbulent river below him. So you got to take extreme caution. Okay, one, you want to walk straight, but lean a little bit to the right, I might fall. Lean a little to the left, I might fall. So similarly, this is the case with Yaakov and Tiferet, that and this is what brought him a lot of fear. It brought him a lot of anxiety in his life. He had to make sure he didn't deviate too much to the right or too much to the left, and therefore he had to practice extreme caution when walking the fine line down the middle. So it says the Rabbi Zidichov that this is what it means here. That Vayira Yaakov me'od vayetzer lo. Yaakov was extremely fearful because he had to walk this narrow path, and that's the implication of the word vayetzer lo from the word sab. It was narrow. He was fearful lest he deviate too far from the straight narrow path to the right or the left, which would have been inappropriate. Okay, good. Very nice Perush. There is a beautiful, beautiful idea shared here by R Pinchas Friedman that I want to share. That he embellishes this idea and he connects it to something unbelievable. He explains why Yaakov Avinu became fearful at that moment, specifically at this moment when approaching Esav. And again, we still have to figure out the dividing of the camps. We have to figure out why send angels, actual angels. There's an important yesod, an important principle that is taught by the Ramban at the beginning of this week's parasha. He explains the underlying strategy of Yaakov when trying to appease Esav. And his words actually are so important that it's used as a lesson for future generations. And he writes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rescued Yaakov Avinu at this moment and redeemed him from a hand that was way more powerful than his. He sent a malach, he sent an angel and saved him. And as well, notice the Ramban says that Yaakov did not rely on his own righteousness. He did his own hishtadlut, something we spoke about in the past. He made every effort to achieve the salvation among his own abilities and using his own hands. And it says the Ramban, incredible lesson. And he says that everything that happened to our father Yaakov Avinu and his brother Esav at this week's parasha will happen to us constantly and repeatedly with Esav's offspring. There's always going to be time where the non-Jews, the goyim, the enemies of the Jewish people, are going to want to confront Am Yisrael, and it is fitting, he writes, for the Jews, for the descendants of Yaakov, to adopt similar methods that Yaakov did when we are ready to confront the non-Jews. And he explains, of course, tefillah, then you have gifts, and ready for battle if need be, in order to be saved. This idea is learned and emphasized by what took place in history, brought down in the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah. The Midrash writes that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the compiler of the Mishnayot, and he was the last of the Tanaim, the generation of the Tanaim. He compiled all the statements of the Tanaim to create what we know as a Mishnah. He was an incredible human being that really changed the course of history for Am Yisrael. And the Midrash writes then that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, also known as Rabbi, would go to the Emperor Antoninus, he would study this parasha, this beginning parasha, Vayishlah Yaakov Malachim, and he would never take the Romans with him on his way to the emperor. So before he would go to the emperors of Rome to debate religious matters, that's something that the Nasi, his job, the Nasi literally means a president. That was his job. He was a representative of the Jewish people. He was a gadolador, and they would often go and debate things with the Romans. And he would always study this parasha first about Yaakov and Esav, and what was Yaakov's demeanor and approach in dealing with kings. And that's why he refused to be escorted by any non-Jews that were sent to him, just like Yaakov refused to be escorted by Esav even after they had made peace, which we're going to get to soon. Now the Ramban explains the Rabbi's rationale for doing so. Why review this parasha? So the Ramban writes that there's a tradition that this parasha is a parasha of Galut. So when Rabbi would arrive in Rome to meet the emperor in the courtyard of the kings of Edom, he would learn this parasha to follow the advice of Yaakov, because it is up to the future generations to see, learn, and emulate what Yaakov did. So he wouldn't accept company of the Romans, like we said, and he didn't want any other non-Jews around him. They don't want to confiscate his money, rob him on the way. I want to be alone. I want to study this parasha and learn the lessons from it. There's a sefer called the Agra de Kala, and he says, if you pay close attention to the pasuk, you can see some gems. The Torah says, "Vaitzav otam lemor." Yaakov commanded them, the angels, saying, Ko tomeru ladoni Esav. Thus you shall say to my Lord Esav. What's the significance of the word lemor? Vaitzav otam lemor. And he commanded them, saying. Normally, whenever you see lemor, Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, for example, the meaning is it's to relate, permission to relate to other people. Gemara says, lemor lo emor. Now we have permission to say whatever was said. Otherwise, if there's no lemor, Hashem says you can't say. It gives you a right to share what Hashem wants you to. Lemor, go and say. That's normally what it means. But it can't be the meaning in this pasuk, because right after that, it says, Ko tomeru ladoni Esav. So you shall say to my master Esav. So what does lemor mean? So says Zagai Kala, the lemor here is Yaakov Avinu was conveying a message to a future descendant, aka Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And because he foresaw that Rabbeinu HaKadosh would have to discuss religious matters with the Roman Emperor Antoninus, who they were good friends, by the way. Big story about that. One day maybe we'll get to it. Could be we even spoke about this once in the class. And Yaakov wanted to teach his future descendant how to deal with the emperor, with respect, with awe. And the Midrash relates a story. Rabbeinu Amar le Rabbi Afas, that Rabbeinu HaKadosh told this scribe, his name was Rabbi Afas, Ketov chad igra min shemi lemaran malka Antoninus. Please write a letter from me to the Malka Antoninus, the Emperor Antoninus. Kam vekatav. So he wrote a letter, and in the letter it said, Min Yehuda Nesia, from Judah the Nasi, Lemaran Malka Antoninus, to Master the King Antoninus. Nasva vekarye. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi took the letter, read it, and ripped it up. Amar le, he went and he told the scribe, Ketuv, you have to write, Min Avdach Yehuda, from your servant Yehuda. Don't write Yehuda Nasi, the president. You have to write on the letter from your servant. Lemaran Malka Antoninus. Amar le, the scribe told Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi, miprema ata mevazel kevodcha. Why are you demeaning your own honor? Why are you referring to yourself in this letter as your servant, Yehuda? Amar le. So he answered him, Ma ana tav min sabi? Am I greater than my grandfather? Lo kach amar ko amar avdecha Yaakov. Didn't Yaakov Avinu, when he sent the letter, the message with the angels, didn't he say, so said your servant Yaakov? If Yaakov Avinu was calling himself a servant to Esav, then I have to call myself a servant to Melech Antoninus. So Rabbeinu HaKadosh actually learned from Yaakov how to show respect and fear to Antoninus, just like Yaakov said to Esav, so said your servant Yaakov. And this was Yaakov's intent when he said, Vaitzav otam lemor. He was conveying that message to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, to learn from his example. This you shall say to my Lord, my master, Ladoni, Avdecha Yaakov, your servant Yaakov, Im Lavan Garti Vayechar Adata. So I want you to use the same format Yaakov Avinu is telling Rabbi Yehuda Nasi later on in history. Avdecha Yehuda, from your servant Yehuda to our sovereign, the king, the emperor of Antoninus. Now, very nice, beautiful, cute, but we can really, really expand this and to see how powerful this idea really is. The Agra de Kala, it's written in Parashat Toldot. We read a couple weeks ago that Rivka was pregnant and she didn't understand what was going on inside of her because it was very painful. That the boys wreaked havoc in her, and she went. She didn't know what was going on. She went to inquire to Hashem, and Hashem said, "Vayomer Hashem la shene goyim bebitnech." You have two goyim, two nations in your womb. Now, the word goyim is not spelled normally like goyim; it's spelled differently, and the word goyim can be interpreted to be read as geim. This is Rashi. Rashi says, don't read it as goyim, read it as geim, the proud ones. And Rashi says, who are the two proud ones that are going to come from you? Antoninus and the Rebbe. Antoninus descended from Esav, and Rabbi Yehuda descended from Yaakov. Says Megalei Amukot, this is something we spoke about in the past, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hinted to Rivka that Rabbeinu HaKadosh was a nitzotz, was a spark, a divine spark from the neshama of Yaakov Avinu. He actually was like a little Gilgul from Yaakov. The Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, if you take the word Nasi, Nun, Sin, Yud, Aleph, Nitzotz Shel Yaakov Avinu. Same letters. Nitzotz Shel Yaakov Avinu. So what was HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling Rivka when she went to go pray to him? What's going on inside of me? You have two proud nations in your womb. You have Antoninus and you have Rebbe. And there's going to be a time where the relationship between the two are going to be amended because Antoninus and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi were very, very good friends. Not only that, says the Megalei Amukot, if you look at Moshe Rabbeinu's prayer, Ba'et Chanan el Hashem ba'et hahi lemor, also used the word lemor. The Megalei Amukot also interprets that prayer of Moshe Rabbeinu as one on behalf of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that he should find favor in the eyes of the Emperor Antoninus, which is going to fortify and give him the strength to redact the Torah Shebe'al Peh. And he says, Lemor stands for, it's an acronym for Limot Antoninus Melech Romi. That's what it stands for the times of Antoninus, the Emperor of Rome. So this makes a lot of sense with the message that Yaakov Avinu was conveying to the Malachim, the angels that he dispatched to Esav. I want you to convey a message to future generations as per what we just said. Lemor, Limot Antoninus Melech Romi. Yaakov intended for Rabbeinu HaKadosh to learn from this example, show respect, show awe to Antoninus, just like he did when he approached Esav. Ko Amar Avdecha Yaakov. So now, with this in mind, we can explain why there was so much fear, such a tremendous level of anxiety that overcame Yaakov on account of the midah of tiferet, the narrow straits that he had to negotiate. Vayira Yaakov meod vayetzer lo. After he appeased Esav with gifts, Esav proposed a friendship. He proposed his camaraderie. Let's be friends. Vayomer nis'a v'nelecha. Let us go together. I'm going to proceed alongside you. We're going to be friends. My children, your children, our grandchildren will grow up. And Rashi says that Esav told Yaakov, I'm going to do this favor. I'm going to extend my travel time. I'm going to stay here longer until you're ready by going as slowly as you need to. And that's what he meant by lenegdecha. And Yaakov turned down this friendly gesture. And he says, the pasuk says, Vayomer elav Adoni yodea ki hayiladim rakim ve'atzon v'abakar alot alai. He told him, listen, my Lord knows, again referring to Esav, children are young, the flocks and the cattle, they're nursing, it's all on me. Utfakum yom echad v'metu kol hatzon. If I drive them hard for one day, they're all going to die. Ya'avor na adoni lifnei abdo. I got an idea. Yaakov tells us, you just go ahead. Okay? And I'm going to go according to the manner of the work that's before me in the manner of the children. I gotta work at my own pace. I hope you understand, dear brother. That was Yaakov's response to his brother Esav. Says the Ben Ish Chai that an idea that we see in many Sefarim, that the enemies of Israel, they attack us in one of two ways. They either attack us trying to annihilate us completely, like Haman, the story of Purim, or they wage a spiritual battle. They try to assimilate us, like the Greeks in the time of Chanukah. Like the David HaMelech writes in Tehillim, right? Arvu ba'goyim v'yilamedu ma'asehem. They mingled with the goyim and they learned their ways. Look what the Ben Ish Chai writes. Yesh ledagdek ech ne'epach Esav le'ish acher levakesh ha'chevra im Yaakov avinu. He doesn't understand. What changed in Esav that now he wants to be friends with his brother? Let's not forget that when he came originally, it was to kill him. He wanted him dead. It seems to me, he writes, yeah, that was his intent at first. Coming with a sword and piercing all of them, killing them on the spot, right there. And at the end, now came the opposite. He left the sword and the war with Yaakov. Now we're going to be business partners. We're going to share backyards. We're going to invite each other to barbecues. Let's walk together. I'm going to protect you. He writes, Esav is not saying this out of love. He's saying this out of hatred. Because he thought, this is my way to ruin him. This is my way to demoralize him, to destroy him spiritually. There's no way he can get out of this. I'm going to be able to overcome him. Yaakov Avinu wasn't stupid. He wasn't naive. He figured it out right away. And he didn't pay attention. And he told him, my master, you know, my children, they're young, my flocks, they're still young, I can't push them, they're going to die, so on and so forth. I know that you don't mean this. I know that that's not what your intent is. You want to take control of my children. You want to rule over everything that I possess, what I own. Through how? By convincing them to follow your ways, by assimilating them. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to push too hard and they're all going to die. All my flock, everyone's going to die because you won't be able to sustain what you want to instill in my kids. Now what the Ben Ish Chai says, what's going on over here. So Yaakov, when he's knowing that he's about to face his brother, he is really in a state of fear and dread. Vayira Yaakov me'od. And yes, although Yaakov's midav tiferet is characterized by rachamim, but there's still a nora aspect. There's still an awesome aspect. His fear was on account of vayetzer lo. He was in a tight spot. He was in a dilemma. He had to tread a fine line, a straight line. I can't deviate from the right or from the left. And this was what was going on with this reunion with Esav. On one hand, he had to show him chesed. On one hand, he had to draw near with the right hand. And he had to appease him. I'm going to offer you gifts. Here's animals. Here's bakar and so on, flock and oxen. And this was a premonition of the future galuyot. This was going to take place in the future when Bnei Israel are going to have to appease the descendants of Esav. It's making friends with the nations of the world because we have to. because they're in charge right now before the days of Mashiach. And we have to make sure that they're happy. So we follow the rules. We're nice to them. We share information, share technology. This is part of it. But at the same time, while that was the hand of Chesed, the right hand is bringing in and making the friendliness. You still have the other hand, where Yaakov had to push him away with the left. Because if he draws too close to Esav, then the offspring are corrupted. And the children are messed up. So Yaakov had to compromise. I'm going to give you gifts, but I'm going to keep my distance. And therefore he told Esav, you go ahead. You go ahead. I'm going to take it easy. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of my flock and my animals. I'm going to go according to their manner. And that was Yaakov's strategic plan. He divided the people, he divided the flocks, he divided the cattle into two camps. He divided the people of Israel into two distinct groups. The only time we see really two distinct groups amongst Bnei Israel is Yisachar and Zebulun, two of the children of Yaakov, Bnei Israel, Yisachar and Zebulun. One group is a group that Zebulun, that lives in peace with the offspring of Esav, because Zebulun were the businessmen. Zebulun were the one that went on the ships to trade. They were the merchants, and they traded with non-Jews. At least externally, during the period of Galut, this is what the businessmen do. They're out there. They negotiate, partners. And then you have the second group. The second group is the Yisachar, who devote themselves totally to the study of Torah. And I don't want to get too close to Esav. They do whatever they can to shelter themselves and keeping a spiritual distance to preserve what's important to them, to preserve their heritage, to preserve their culture, to avoid adopting the corrupt ways of Esav and his descendants. And that's the significance of the pasuk. Vayomer im yavo Esav veikau. If Esav comes, the Machaneh Achad and attacks it. If Esav comes and attacks one camp by drawing them near and corrupting them, then you shall know Hamachaneh Nishar Nifleta, that the remaining camp will survive. The second camp is going to come to the rescue, because they're going to come and remind the first group what it's all about. That you're just doing this, you're making friends with them just because we're in Galut. It's before the Geulah. You have no choice. They're ruling. But they're going to come and remind them. And they're going to wage a spiritual battle, like the Chashmonaim did at the time of the Greeks. And that's what Rashi says over here. The remaining camp shall be a refuge, shall escape against Esav's will, because I will do battle with him. The second group is going to come and I'm going to fight. And that's why Yaakov split the camp into two groups. He intended for there to be a group of people that are devoted totally to spirituality, to remain vigilant, to stand watch, protecting the holiness of Klal Yisrael, protecting the Kedusha of Klal Yisrael, and wage a spiritual battle if they had to. And this is what Yaakov said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, Hatzileni na miyad achi, miyad Esav. Our commentators famously say that Yaakov implored God to save him from Esav, the two personalities of Esav. You have one where he treats him like achi, like my brother, who wants to, like a good or bad uncle that may influence for the good or the non-good of his nephews. That's Esav the brother, but Yaakov was worried about the corruption of his children. And then you have Esav. You have the Esav factor, which is the galut. The latter doesn't behave like his brother. He reveals the disdain, he reveals the hatred very openly to harm Israel. And that meant that dealing with Esav requires a very, very special balance. And that was the balance that he needed to employ with this reunion of Esav. And this is what Yaakov Avinu wanted to teach the future generations in Galut. In the words of Rashi, he prepared himself for three things: giving gifts, tefillah, and war. And it's exactly what Yaakov did for all future, in preparation for all future Galuyot. He presented Esav with gifts to calm him down, to pacify him, so that he wouldn't harm the Jewish people in Galut. But he knew that this peace with Esav was only external. We see it nowadays. So, next thing you have to do is you have to resort to tefillah. You have to resort for prayer. Like Yaakov prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to pray to Hashem that Esav and his descendants don't corrupt our ways and our morals. Chas v'shalom. That we lead to assimilation. And that's accomplished by fighting, by combating Esav in spiritual matters to the bitter end, not giving up. Certain things we don't bend for. Spiritual matters are spiritual matters, and it doesn't matter. We fight to the end. It's the Yisachar. The Zebulun, okay, until the Geulah, the Zebulun will do what they have to do. But once Esav starts penetrating Zebulun and influencing them, Yisachar has to come and defend and say, no, it can't be. Maybe this is the reason why Yaakov felt the need to send angels and not human messengers. Says in Noam Elimelech, by Tzavotam Lemor, he commanded them, saying, Ko tomeru ladoni le'esav, Abdecha Yaakov im Lavan garti. This is what you shall say to them. Your servant Yaakov lived with Lavan, va'echar adat, and lingered till now. This was aimed only to appease Esav. The whole purpose of this was to appease him. But why was it necessary to depict himself to the angels in this way? Ko tomeru ladoni le'esav. So you shall say to my Lord Esav. What purpose did this serve? So it says Noam Elimelech that this message that he gave to the Malachim was a dual purpose. Superficially, they appeared to pacify Esav. But in reality, it contained a prayer. It contained a supplication that was directed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ko tomeru ladoni le'esav. You shall say these words of tefillah, ladoni. Ladoni is to my master, my real master, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu in heaven, which will also suffice to appease le'esav, for Esav down below. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov, so said your servant Yaakov, im Lavan garti va'echar adata. I have sojourned, I've lived with Lavan, and I've lingered until now. Rashi says, he clarifies this, and he says, I didn't become a dignitary in Laban's house. I didn't become a general. I didn't become a consul general or notable. I was just like a traveler. I was a ger. I was just moving around in Laban's house. And therefore, Esav, it doesn't befit you to hate me over this blessing. You're all upset about this blessing that I took. But what was I? What happened to me all this time? I was in Laban's house where he cheated me over and over again. So why are you getting upset? It hasn't been fulfilled. Not only that, Rashi says, Garti is Gematria Tariag 613, as if to say, although I was a ger in Laban's house, but I observed the mitzvot, the Tariag mitzvot, and did not learn from his evil deeds. And says the R Friedman, both opinions of Rashi are accurate. Both are correct. I was a ger in Laban's house. I did not become a dignitary. I did not become an important person. According to the first interpretation, it was directed towards Esav to assure him that Yitzchak's brachot did not come to fruition, and there was no reason to hate him. And according to the second interpretation, that I kept all the mitzvot, was that this statement was directed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem, you got to protect me. The first part of the statement was to Esav. Second part of the statement was to Hashem. Im Lavan garti va'echar adata. I did what I had to do. You got to protect me. That's what the Noam Elimelech writes. But maybe we can understand as follows. Yaakov had to perform two opposite functions, like we've been saying this whole time. On the one hand, he had to make peace with his evil brother. And on the other hand, he had to distance himself as far as he could from his brother, not to stray far from Hashem, chas v'shalom. So Yaakov sent heavenly malachim to accomplish this mission, knowing that they were going to help him find that balance of tiferet. And they came to Esav, presenting Yaakov's prayer to connect with him and to draw Yaakov closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as we read this story and we try to figure out exactly Yaakov's strategy, It reminds us of what our goal is here in Galut. What are we supposed to do? Yaakov Avinu was ultimately sending a message. We are no doubt, hopefully, in the last stages of our Galut, but the nations of the world are still in charge, and they still control us until Mashiach comes. And we need to have faith, number one, and we have to be respectful. We have to be in awe, right? It's not I stand in front of the president or the prime minister or the queen or the king and I say, who are you? I don't care. You're not my king. You're not my queen. No, there's like Rabbeinu HaKadosh said. What are you talking about? Abdecha Yehuda. Your servant Yehuda. I understand my position right now. I understand my role, but know that this is only temporary. Know that there's going to be a time where it's not going to be like that. There's going to be a time where Yaakov's blessings will come to fruition. But my goal right now is that although I live among you, and although you are in control, I cannot let your influence and your wrong morals affect me. And that is our job. We are Bnei Israel, we are Bnei Yaakov, and therefore our job is to balance that. Is to know the right and the left. Is know when to bring in, but at the same time know when to push back. And Bezat Hashem will come time in Mashiach when everything will be clear, and Am Yisrael, Bezat Hashem will be in control, as declaring Hashem as king, and we'll bring everybody together under that recognition of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. Wishing everyone a wonderful night.